Americana kind of deal, and then obviously, he gets caught on tape, saying some derogatory, racist thing.
For decades, Hulk Hogan was worshipped as the ultimate wrestling hero, the larger-than-life figure who carried an entire era on his back. Fans saw the smiles, the poses, and the glory, but they never saw what went on behind the curtain.
Hulk Hogan, controversial athlete and actor, headline-making reality TV star. The guy was a game-changer in the world of professional wrestling. But tonight, in the midst of a racial slur scandal, he's fighting to repair his legacy.
Now, The Undertaker has finally pulled that curtain back. And what he reveals is not the story of a hero, but of a man whose backstage behavior, manipulations, and betrayals left scars that may never heal. The darker side of Hulk Hogan is about to be exposed. The shattered image of Hulk Hogan. For millions of fans around the world, Hulk Hogan was more than just a wrestler. He was the larger-than-life superhero who told children to say their prayers and eat their vitamins. His colorful yellow and red gear, his handlebar mustache, and his famous leg drop made him the face of professional wrestling in the 1980s and 1990s. Hogan was the man who defeated giants, carried wrestling into mainstream culture, and inspired countless young fans to believe in the power of hard work and determination. On the surface, he seemed untouchable. One of the defining moments of Hogan's career came in 1987 at WrestleMania 3 when he faced the unbeatable Andre the Giant. In a moment that still sends shivers down the spines of fans, Hogan lifted the massive 520-pound Andre and slammed him to the mat before finishing him with the leg drop. That victory wasn't just a win inside the ring. It became a symbol of heroism, showing fans that even the impossible could be conquered. But his story didn't end there. Hogan shocked the wrestling world years later when he turned his back on fans and joined the villainous New World Order in WCW. The heel turn in 1996 was one of the most infamous moments in wrestling history. Children who had once idolized him cried in the stands as their hero transformed into the sport's most hated villain. Still, whether loved or despised, Hogan's name carried unmatched weight. He was always the center of attention, the man around whom the industry seemed to revolve. On the outside, Hogan was the perfect superstar. He was strong, charismatic, and inspirational. He was the role model parents wanted their kids to admire. Yet behind the curtain, the reality was much darker. Fellow wrestlers tell stories that strip away the hero mask and expose a man willing to manipulate, betray, and crush others just to keep his place at the top. Perhaps the most shocking sign of this hidden truth came from The Undertaker. Known for being one of the most professional and respectful figures in the business, The Undertaker rarely speaks poorly about anyone. When the news broke that Hulk Hogan had passed away, the wrestling world paused. No matter how divisive he had become, his name was still carved deep into the history of the sport. Fans who had once cheered for him in the 1980s remembered the hero in yellow and red, the man who told them to believe in themselves, say their prayers, and eat their vitamins. But wrestlers who had worked with him carried a very different memory, one filled with betrayal, manipulation, and bitterness. Amid the storm of reactions, one voice stood out. The Undertaker. Known for his calm presence and respect for the business, Undertaker rarely spoke ill of others. Yet, when asked about Hogan's death, his words carried both weight and honesty. The Undertaker did not deny Hogan's contributions. He admitted that without Hulk Hogan, wrestling might never have reached the heights it did in the 1980s. Hogan headlined 8 of the first 9 WrestleManias. He helped Vince McMahon expand WWE into a global powerhouse, and he turned wrestling into mainstream entertainment. "You can't take that away from him," Undertaker said. He acknowledged the undeniable truth. Hogan had been a driving force behind wrestling's golden era. But The Undertaker did not stop there. He also addressed the darker side of Hogan's life, the side wrestlers in the locker room knew too well. He spoke of Hogan's ego, his constant need to be the center of attention, and the way his politics damaged the careers of others. He reminded people that while Hogan built his own legacy, He often did so by stepping on those around him. To Undertaker, Hogan's story was both a rise and a fall. Other voices in wrestling echoed the same theme. Seth Rollins, one of today's top stars, described Hogan as a man destroyed by his own ego. MVP had long called him out as a liar and a hypocrite. And Tony Khan, president of AEW, went as far as banning Hogan and his wife from AEW events, showing how deep the rejection ran across the entire industry. Even in death, those wounds had not healed. The contrast between Hogan's public image and his private behavior could not have been more extreme. To the fans, he was a hero who fought villains inside the squared circle. But to many wrestlers, he was the villain, the one who would use politics, lies, and selfish choices to protect himself at the expense of everyone else. While children at home were copying his poses in the mirror, wrestlers in the locker room were quietly seething at the way he conducted himself behind the scenes. And that is why Hulk Hogan's legacy is so conflicted. He built wrestling's greatest moments, but he also created some of its deepest wounds. To the world, he was the superhero who slammed Andre the Giant. To his peers, he was the one who betrayed trust and manipulated the business for his own gain. But if Hogan wasn't the hero he claimed to be, what dark secret from the 1980s made wrestlers turn against him forever? Let's tell you surprising details. The Union betrayal of 1986. In the 1980s, professional wrestling was booming. Arenas were packed, merchandise was flying off the shelves, and Hulk Hogan was the face plastered everywhere. Fans thought wrestlers lived like rock stars, but the truth behind the curtain was completely different. Most wrestlers were not treated as full-time employees. They were classified as independent contractors. This meant they had no health insurance, no retirement benefits, no unemployment coverage, and no real job security. These men and women were traveling nearly 300 days a year, beating their bodies to pieces, only to come home with mounting medical bills and very little stability. Some of them gave decades of their lives to the business, only to end up with broken bodies and empty bank accounts. It was an unfair system, and one man finally decided enough was enough. That man was Jesse "The Body" Ventura. In 1987, Ventura returned from filming the movie Predator in Hollywood, where he worked alongside actors protected by the Screen Actors Guild. He saw firsthand the difference a union made. His co-stars had health coverage, retirement plans, and guarantees that wrestling could only dream about. The contrast lit a fire inside him. Why should wrestlers risk their lives nightly while having no protection at all? Ventura stood up in front of his fellow wrestlers before WrestleMania 2 and made an impassioned speech. He told them this was their moment. All eyes were on WrestleMania, and if they refused to wrestle unless union negotiators were brought in, federal law would back them. Ventura painted a powerful picture of what life could be like with a union. Lower health care costs, retirement checks for veterans of the ring, dignity for men who sacrificed their youth for the business. It was a vision of hope that electrified the locker room. The spark for this movement came from a single conversation Ventura never forgot. While in Las Vegas, he shared an elevator with Gene Upshaw, the head of the NFL Players Association. Upshaw pointed his finger and told Ventura, "You boys need a union." Those words stuck, and Ventura knew it was time. The wrestlers were inspired, but something went horribly wrong. The very next day, Vince McMahon somehow knew about Ventura's private talk. He shut it down immediately. Ventura was shocked. There were no WWE officials at that meeting, no cameras, no outsiders. So who told Vince? Who betrayed the wrestlers' trust? Years later, during a lawsuit, the answer was finally revealed. Ventura's lawyer cornered Vince McMahon under oath. When asked how he knew about the union attempt, Vince answered without hesitation, "Hulk Hogan told me." The revelation hit Ventura like a thunderbolt. Hogan, the biggest star in wrestling, the man who preached about loyalty and doing the right thing, had ratted them out. Hogan chose his own position and wealth, over the future of every man in that locker room. And the truth was even more brutal. Ventura later learned that Hogan was earning more than the entire WrestleMania 3 roster combined. While legends like Andre the Giant were working through unbearable pain without medical coverage, while journeyman wrestlers were scraping by with little to show for their sacrifice, Hogan was at the very top, counting checks larger than all of his peers put together. Why would he risk changing the system when the system made him richer than everyone else? For Ventura, the betrayal cut deep. He had tried to fight for everyone, to build a better future. And the one man powerful enough to make it happen destroyed it with a single conversation. Ventura admitted later that bitterness stayed with him for decades. He had his union protection through the Screen Actors Guild, but his fellow wrestlers would never get the same. Wrestling, to this very day, remains one of the few major entertainment industries without union representation. Even The Undertaker, who usually avoids commenting on politics, has reflected on this. He acknowledged how brutal the business was on wrestlers' bodies, and he never denied that Hogan's betrayal left lasting scars in the industry. The Undertaker respected loyalty, brotherhood, and toughness. To see a supposed leader like Hogan sell out his own locker room went against everything the wrestling brotherhood was supposed to mean. Let's reveal how Hogan's greatest weapon tore through wrestling history and left chaos in its wake. Creative control and the politics of power. If Jesse Ventura's union story showed the world how selfish Hulk Hogan could be, what came next revealed just how dangerous his power truly was. Hogan's greatest weapon wasn't his leg drop or his star power, it was something hidden in his contracts, a clause that became infamous in wrestling history. It was called creative control. The most famous example came in WCW at Starrcade 1997. This was supposed to be the biggest event in the company's history. For over a year, WCW had built up the story of Sting as the mysterious Dark Avenger who would finally defeat Hogan and end the reign of the villainous New World Order. Fans were on the edge of their seats, waiting for Sting's moment of triumph. But Hogan had other plans. Instead of losing cleanly, he pushed for a strange finish involving referee Nick Patrick, making a fast count. The ending confused everyone. Sting's victory felt hollow, and fans were left disappointed. What should have been wrestling's version of Luke Skywalker defeating Darth Vader turned into a muddled mess. WCW's biggest storyline collapsed, and the blame pointed straight at Hogan. This was not the only time. Years earlier in WWE, Hogan had already played the same political games. At WrestleMania 9th in 1993, the company wanted to position Bret the Hitman Hart as the next big star. Bret had the skill, the popularity, and the respect of his peers. He was supposed to carry WWE into the future. But Hogan refused to lose the championship to him. He claimed Hart was too small to be a believable champion. Instead, Hogan used his influence to snatch the spotlight one last time, walking away with the title and leaving Bret Hart's rise stalled. Hogan's politics did not just hurt rivals. He also used his power to elevate his friends. Wrestlers like Brutus Beefcake, Earthquake, and Typhoon received contracts and opportunities far beyond what their talent or popularity deserved. One of the most infamous examples was Starrcade 1994, when Hogan insisted on facing Beefcake under the name The Butcher instead of giving fans the dream match against Sting. The result was a weak main event that fans and critics alike trashed. The damage spread to other stars as well. Scott Steiner, after transforming into his Big Papa Pump character, was ready for a major push. He had charisma, intensity, and fans were responding to him. But Hogan made sure Steiner lost his first big match as the new character. It was sabotage, pure and simple, and Steiner never forgave him. Years later, Steiner didn't hold back, calling Hogan a man who used his power to crush anyone he saw as a threat. Even established stars weren't safe. In 1995, Hogan clashed with Vader, a monster in the ring with real credibility. Their feud could have been legendary, but Hogan's refusal to compromise killed it. He didn't want to show weakness, and the storyline collapsed. By the late 1990s, WCW was drowning in Hogan's politics. His creative control made it impossible to push new stars. His ego suffocated the company's biggest storylines. And while Hogan was protecting his spot, WCW slowly began to die. Fans turned away, younger talent left frustrated, and the once great company spiraled toward its end. If Hogan could manipulate giants like Sting and Bret Hart, what happened when he brought his politics into new places like TNA wrestling? Let's reveal what came next. The TNA era and continued manipulation. When WCW finally collapsed in the early 2000s, many fans thought the wrestling world had seen the last of Hulk Hogan's backstage politics. His reputation was already stained by years of manipulation and self-serving decisions. WWE had moved on, new stars were rising, and Hogan seemed destined to remain a legend of the past. But that was not the end. Another company opened its doors to him, hoping to use his name to gain mainstream attention. That company was TNA Wrestling. TNA was young, ambitious, and looking to grow. It wanted to be the alternative to WWE, the fresh voice for fans who were tired of the same stories. But the moment Hogan walked in, the same old patterns began to repeat themselves. Instead of embracing new ideas, Hogan reached into his bag of tricks and pulled out something fans had already seen countless times: the New World Order style. In TNA, Hogan pushed for storylines that recycled the same invading faction concept that once worked in WCW. But this was not the 1990s anymore. Fans had seen it before, and they wanted something new. Instead, Hogan dragged TNA backwards, rehashing ideas that had long lost their magic. What could have been a time of innovation turned into a shadow of the past. Fans could see it. Wrestlers could feel it. The energy that had once made TNA exciting was slowly being drained by politics that felt all too familiar. Hogan was repeating the same mistakes that hurt WCW. He put loyalty to his inner circle above the company's growth. He trusted old formulas instead of giving new stars a chance. And in doing so, he held TNA back from reaching the potential it had promised. For wrestlers like Matt Morgan, this was a bitter pill. Morgan was built like a giant, had microphone skills, and was connecting with fans. Magnus, who would later become a world champion, was another young talent with the tools to succeed. But both men found themselves stalled because the spotlight was reserved for Hogan's chosen few. It was déjà vu. Just as he had done in WCW by elevating Brutus Beefcake or sidelining Bret Hart and Sting, Hogan once again chose politics over progress. Wrestlers who had worked hard to build their names were left frustrated, watching the company circle around Hogan's vision instead of pushing forward. The result was predictable. TNA, instead of rising to challenge WWE, struggled to find its identity. Fans grew tired of recycled storylines and the overexposure of Hogan and his allies. What was meant to be the company's golden era under Hogan's star power turned into a period of disappointment. Hogan's political games weren't his only downfall. His web of outrageous lies revealed a character even darker than fans imagined. You'll be surprised with some of his wildest claims. The lies that exposed his character. If Hulk Hogan's backstage politics painted him as selfish and manipulative, his lies revealed something even stranger. Hogan wasn't just known for winning titles or tearing down rivals. He became infamous for stories so wild and unbelievable that they turned him into a figure of ridicule. His compulsive lying damaged his credibility and showed fans and wrestlers alike that the man behind the mustache was not the hero they thought they knew. One of Hogan's most talked-about lies involved the legendary band Metallica. Over the years, Hogan told fans and interviewers that he was almost their bassist in the early days. According to him, he made tapes of his playing, sent letters, and even tried for 2 weeks to reach out to their management. If true, it would have been an incredible story. Hogan in a heavy metal band before becoming a wrestling superstar. But when Metallica's own members were asked, they laughed in confusion. Lars Ulrich said he had never even heard of Hogan trying out. James Hetfield was equally puzzled. To them, the story was a complete fabrication. Hogan had invented an entire chapter of his life that never happened. And that was only the beginning. Hogan once claimed he wrestled 400 days in a year. He explained it by saying that international travel and time zone changes added extra days. It sounded dramatic, but it was also nonsense. A calendar year has 365 days. No amount of flying around the globe could add an extra 35. The claim was so absurd that fans joked about Hogan bending the laws of time itself. Instead of inspiring awe, it made him look ridiculous. Then came the lies involving famous names. Hogan once told people he partied with John Belushi after WrestleMania 2. The problem? Belushi had died in 1982, 4 years before that event even took place. There was no possible way the story could be true, but Hogan still told it. Another time, he insisted that Elvis Presley had been a Hulkamania fan, attending his matches in Memphis. But Elvis had died in 1977, 2 years before Hogan even arrived in Memphis wrestling. These claims weren't just stretches of the truth, they were flat-out impossible. The pattern kept repeating. Hogan's lies weren't just about adding drama to his life story. They showed a man desperate to stay larger than life, even if it meant rewriting history. Fans wanted to believe in their hero, but every time one of his claims was debunked, that trust was shattered a little more. Even more damaging were his lies about steroids. Behind closed doors, Hogan admitted to fellow wrestlers that he used them. In fact, many stars of the 1980s did, but in public, Hogan denied it, especially when speaking to the media and young fans. At a time when children looked up to him as a role model, he pushed the idea of clean living, training, and vitamins while hiding the truth about performance-enhancing substances. This hypocrisy made him look dishonest and manipulative, especially when others in the business were open about the realities of wrestling life. Over time, Hogan's reputation for lying became so strong that it turned into a running joke among fans and wrestlers. People didn't just ask if Hogan was telling the truth, they expected him to be exaggerating or inventing. For someone who had once been the most trusted face in wrestling, this was a devastating fall. But the lies were not just harmless stories. They chipped away at the last pieces of respect Hogan still held. Each fabrication reminded people that Hogan cared more about protecting his image than being honest. Wrestlers who worked with him rolled their eyes at his stories. Fans who once believed in him started doubting every word that came out of his mouth. Yet as bad as the lies were, they paled in comparison to the scandal that would finally destroy his reputation for good. Let's reveal how one shocking moment erased Hulk Hogan from wrestling history. Scandals and the racism fallout. For years, Hulk Hogan's lies and backstage politics had chipped away at his reputation, but nothing compared to the storm that erupted in 2015. That year, the world saw Hogan not as the superhero in yellow and red, but as a man stripped of his mask. A leaked sex tape revealed him using racial slurs while talking about his daughter's relationship with a black man. In the recording, Hogan admitted, "I am a racist, to a point." The fallout was instant and brutal. WWE, the very company that had built itself on Hogan's broad shoulders in the 1980s, acted swiftly. They fired him, erased him from their Hall of Fame, and scrubbed his name from their official website. It was as if Hulk Hogan had never existed. The man who once headlined WrestleManias and carried the company into the mainstream was suddenly a ghost, deleted from the history he had helped write. But the harshest judgment did not come from WWE's corporate offices. It came from the wrestlers themselves, especially black wrestlers who had looked at Hogan as a hero only to hear him expose his true thoughts. Mark Henry, a Hall of Famer and respected veteran, spoke openly about how disappointed he was. He explained that Hogan had done little to repair the damage. There was no true effort to reach out, no real apology that felt genuine. Henry made it clear that for him, forgiveness would require work. Work Hogan seemed unwilling to do. The New Day, one of WWE's most popular groups, also released a statement. They explained that they could not simply forget or brush aside Hogan's words. To them, racism wasn't just about one moment caught on tape. It was about respect, dignity, and accountability. They wrote that they did not hate Hogan, but they could not welcome him back with open arms after what he had said. Their message resonated with fans who also struggled to separate the childhood hero from the man exposed by scandal. MVP, another outspoken wrestler, went further. On social media, he didn't mince words. He referred to Hogan as a pathological lying piece of human excrement. His anger reflected what many wrestlers felt, that Hogan had hidden behind a fake persona for decades while harboring thoughts that went against everything the wrestling community claimed to stand for. Despite the uproar, WWE tried to bring Hogan back in 2018. They reinstated him into the Hall of Fame, hoping time had softened the outrage. But when Hogan appeared backstage to address the locker room, the response was icy. Many wrestlers refused to accept his apology. They saw it as empty, a performance meant to save face rather than heal wounds. The chill in the air that day made it clear. Hogan's image was beyond repair. Even The Undertaker, known for his professionalism and loyalty, could not defend him. Undertaker was the type of man who avoided public feuds and rarely spoke badly of anyone. Yet, when asked about Hogan's return, he offered no sympathy. His silence spoke volumes, showing just how deep the disgust ran within the industry. If even The Undertaker, someone who had shared locker rooms with Hogan for years, could not support him, then Hogan's standing with his peers was truly finished. The scandal was seen as the final straw. For years, Hogan had been accused of selfishness, manipulation, and dishonesty. Now his own words revealed a side of him that no amount of posing or catchphrases could cover up. It raises the ultimate question: how does history remember him? Was he the hero who built wrestling's boom, or the villain who destroyed his own legacy? Let's find answers and tell you what The Undertaker finally says about him after his death. Undertaker's words on Hulk's death. After Hulk's death, Undertaker's words reflected a balanced approach. He did not spit venom, but he did not hide the truth. He spoke of Hogan as a man who could have been remembered only for greatness, yet instead allowed lies, selfishness, and racism to overshadow everything he had built. His legacy is complicated, Undertaker admitted. You can't write the history of wrestling without him, but you can't ignore the damage either. Hogan's legacy in the ring is impossible to deny. He headlined 8 of the first 9 WrestleManias. He brought wrestling into mainstream entertainment, appearing in movies, cartoons, and talk shows. He was a pop culture icon, known not just to wrestling fans, but to the entire world. At his peak, children idolized him, parents respected him, and even non-fans recognized the power of Hulkamania. His presence filled arenas, sold millions of tickets, and helped turn Vince McMahon's vision into reality. Without Hogan, wrestling may never have become the global empire it is today. But legacy is not built only on victories and glory. When asked about Hogan's death, The Undertaker made that point clear. Known for his respect and loyalty, The Undertaker rarely criticizes others. Yet this time, he did not sugarcoat his words. "You can't write the history of wrestling without him," Undertaker said, acknowledging Hogan's unmatched impact. Then came the truth that many wrestlers had felt for decades. But you can't ignore the damage either. That damage was real. Hogan's ego often got in the way of the business. His creative control contracts derailed storylines. His lies became a running joke among wrestlers and fans. And the 2015 scandal, where his racist remarks came to light, shattered the last pieces of his superhero image. Hogan went from the most loved man in wrestling to one of its most controversial figures. This is what made Undertaker's words so powerful. He respected the history Hogan created, but he could not hide the scars he left behind. Hogan's story is both glory and shame, inspiration and downfall. His legacy is complicated, Undertaker admitted, summing it up perfectly. In the end, Hogan will always be remembered as the man who changed wrestling forever. But he will also be remembered as the man who showed the world how quickly ego and selfishness can destroy even the brightest star. So now the question remains, will fans remember Hulk Hogan as the hero who built wrestling's golden age, or as the fallen icon who destroyed his own legacy? Share your thoughts on it in the comments sections.